welcome to Brewsers, a podcast about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. I'm your host, Rody John, and today we talk to Tyler with Urban Sailor Coffee out of Salt Lake City. We talk all about how they got started off a motorcycle coffee stand, becoming a roaster, and a little bit about Post Malone. I mean, they're from Salt Lake City. There's no way I was not going to bring up Post Malone. I know he lives in the area. They've had a sighting. So, I'm also manifesting for this year. I will not only meet, but interview Post Malone. So, putting it out in the universe is going to be fantastic. But in the meantime, make sure to sign up for our newsletter. It comes out twice a week. You get even more information about our guests. You get fun facts, and you get to find out what's happening with your favorite podcast, all about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. So without further ado, here is Tyler with Urban Sailor Coffee. I'd like to welcome to the show Tyler with Urban Sailor Coffee. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are you? I'm
doing well. Now, for those wondering, kind of paint us a word picture. Where are you at? What's going on around you right
now? I'm actually calling from my home, which is just a couple blocks from our first cafe, and we're in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Very nice. Yeah. Well, how's the weather right now up there?
You know, it's rainy this morning. It rained most of the night, and it's very wet this morning, which means more coffee sales. So I find when it's warm and sunny outside, I'm excited because I can ride my motorcycle, and when it rains, I'm excited because we're going to sell more coffee.
And so I wanted to bring this up at some point, so I guess this is probably the best time. My girlfriend watches the housewife shows, and we'll watch the Salt Lake City one, which I like that one out of some of them because there's the New York ones I can't do that much because in the Jersey I really can't do. It's the accents. It's just awful to me, and it's like somebody sticking a pencil in my ear. But the Salt Lake City one's great, but it's so snowy up there that I was like, oh wow, I imagine, especially when I stumbled upon y'all, I was like, oh, I bet coffee sales are great when it's snowing outside.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we had a huge snow year this last year, so I think the season that they're showing right now, I mean, we had record snowfall last winter, and I think they just film those episodes or series every winter, and so it probably looks like it snows here all year round if you watch those shows.
It's true. There's the only time they're actually in warm weather is when they go on vacation, and it's usually obviously somewhere tropical.
Yeah, it does get hot here in the summer. We get up into I think we even got up to 110 this summer, which was too hot.
Wow.
But it gets over 100 for about, 20, 25 days a year, and stays in the 90s for probably another couple months. And so it does get hot here, but yeah, we do also get 4 seasons.
Very nice. Yeah, I mean, here in North Texas, we're used to being in the triple digits for probably about 90 days at least, and then, it kind of wanes down a little bit from there.
Yeah, and we don't have the humidity. I worked one summer in Houston and Dallas, and it was a different kind of heat for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Houston is just so humid, and then obviously the traffic is just so awful there that, I like visiting, but I could never live down there.
Yeah. Great people, though. I enjoyed working down there.
Oh, yeah. The people down here are the nicest people. Like, I've heard that from other people that have moved here or even visited, and they're like, everyone is just so nice in Texas. And I was like, that's just the way we were brought up, and that's the way it is.
Yeah. I grew up in Alberta, Canada.
Oh, wow.
And I think there's some similarities just because the economy is kind of based around oil, and so the cities kind of grew up around the same time, kind of boomed during the 70s, and so the buildings kind of look similar in Calgary and Dallas and Houston, and I just found a lot of commonalities with just people's perspective and attitudes and stuff like that. So it was kind of nice being down there.
I can see that. Yeah, and the ranching and the cattle is very big up there as well.
Right. That's the other part of it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, speaking of going from North Texas to Salt Lake City, I have to ask, because I'm a big Post Malone fan, have you
come across Post Malone? Because I know he lives in an area.
I haven't yet bumped into Post Malone, although
Okay.
I think I've been close a few times. He does shop at some of the same places I go to, and my son has bumped into him at a gaming store because turns out he's a big gamer. So he goes to this, he goes to the same gaming store that my oldest son goes to. So he's seen him there, and he's very generous and all the things you've probably heard about him. He's a really cool guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he is I think he's an investor in the esports team here in the DFW area, which I thought was
cool.
awesome. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, he goes to a store here in downtown Salt Lake called Oasis, which plays a lot of like Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons and has a bunch of other stuff. And he pops in there, I guess, quite a bit.
Yeah, because he bought I think it's a Magic card, and it was like, I think he paid like $1 million for it, and it was apparently it's like the most rare Magic card. It was either Magic or Pokemon, but I think it was Magic. But I was like, that's nuts. Like that you would spend $1 million on a Magic the Gathering. But I'm not in Magic. So for me, it's not that big a deal.
I know more about it than I should at my age, so I hear about it quite a bit from my son. So yeah, it's crazy what some of those cards go for.
It is nuts, and it's funny because I have a lot of like sports cards that I've had just since I was a kid, and like I want to sell them, but at the same time I'm like I don't want to get bamboozled, and all of a sudden like they're gonna give me $20 for something, and then they turn around and sell it for like $3,000 or more dollars. I'm like I gotta figure out the right person, and then but yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's funny.
Now, we're here to talk about coffee, obviously. What is your earliest memory of coffee?
Well, this is going to be also kind of interesting because I did not grow up around coffee at all.
I heard that.
Yeah, so the Salt Lake part is in part because I grew up Mormon, LDS, and they don't they teach not to drink coffee or alcohol or other things. So I grew up in a very religious household up in Canada, and coffee was just not part of the family, and I was not around it. And so it wasn't until after I had graduated from college and gotten my first job and moved out, kind of real job, and moved out to Seattle for a tech job. And this was in the 90s, late 90s. So I was actually at Seattle during the end of the grunge era, which was pretty awesome, actually. And that was the first time I had coffee, was like right around the time I was turning like 30, which is really unusual. So that's my earliest coffee memory is walking into a coffee shop in Queen Anne, Seattle, not knowing anything about coffee and just saying like, can you make me something that you would recommend, because I don't know what I'm ordering.
Now, how many cups in did you get over the kind of the bitterness, and you figure out exactly kind of where you want to land when it comes to taste for coffee? Yeah,
that's a good question. I'm in my early 50s now, so this was like 20 years ago. And I would say I was hanging out with some people that were avid coffee drinkers. And so my desire to fit in and be cool kept me buying coffees when I didn't really like them initially. But over time, I figured out that I was okay if I, added like, a vanilla flavor or a chocolate to like a mocha drink or something like that. And if it had milk, if it was milk based, and like I think I tried an espresso early on and was like, oh my gosh, how do people do this? Because I hadn't acquired the taste for it yet. But I don't know, like, it's a good question. I don't remember how long it took, but I think, probably somewhere around 6 months or something like that, I started really appreciating like the nuances of coffees and started appreciating it. Definitely within the first year, I was getting hooked and starting to really get it.
Yeah. Well, let's fast forward to now. How do you take your coffee now?
Less milk. I still like milk, but probably my favorite drink is a cortado, which is kind of like equal parts espresso and equal parts milk. I just find that balance works for me. And all once in a while I'll do a shot of espresso, but I do like having a little bit of milk in there. And usually it's oat milk now, but yeah, like an oat milk cortado is probably my jam now.
Yeah, I do love seeing not only the evolution of coffee, but also the evolution of the creamers. Like when we were growing up, it was just milk. That was it. Like that's all you really put in there, maybe half and half, whatever. But now we have the oat milk, we have almond milk, we have soy milk, we have, I've had hemp milk, and I think that tastes really good. And
coconut
then I've heard, coconut is one of my favorites. That most people who have coconut will go that way, as opposed to if they ever have hemp, I'm like, give me the hemp one. But I've also heard that somebody's making I think it's somewhere in Europe, is making a potato creamer or potato milk. Have you heard this?
I have not heard it, which is surprising because I grew up around a lot of potato farms, so that would perk my ears for sure. I'll have to look into that. I haven't heard about it.
I haven't delved any more into them just telling me about it, and I was like, that's interesting, and I'm curious what that tastes like, but I haven't.
It kind of makes sense that they could extract milk that way, but yeah, that's interesting.
It is weird. Now, for those that don't know, how did Urban Sailor Coffee begin?
Yeah, I would say after kind of delving into the coffee shop scene in Seattle in the late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere around that time, I probably started fantasizing about owning my own coffee shop just because I started really loving going to the really good coffee shops around Seattle. And also when I traveled, because I was traveling a lot for work at the time. So when I was in San Francisco or Los Angeles or New York, or even on overseas trips, like personal trips, I would try to find the coolest coffee shops and things like that. And so I've been thinking about it since a long time ago, like over 15 years. But it really wasn't until the pandemic hit where my son, who had been a barista and also a bartender, he was just learning to be a bartender. He moved back in with me during the pandemic, and we started brainstorming about what he wanted to do with his future. And because he'd been thinking he wanted to be a cook and was even in culinary school and things like that, but he decided he wanted to be front of house. And I said to him, why don't we try starting something small, like a coffee business, and we can even start it just with a mobile coffee cart and see how that goes. And that's how we started it during the pandemic.
Yeah, I saw that you did it on a sidecar of the motorcycle, and you, from what I heard and read, you would drive those to the certain events. How did you come across that? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, that's exactly true. We built out the bar on top of the sidecar of a Ural motorcycle, which is a kind of a Russian knockoff of a German World War II bike. And the truth is, I saw something like this in Portland about 5 years earlier at a motorcycle show, and I love motorcycles, and so I like to tinker on old motorcycles and things in my garage. And so I go to these motorcycle shows once in a while. There's one in Portland called the One Moto Show, and CC Motorcycle Coffee had a Ural with a espresso machine mounted on it at one of these shows, and I was blown away. I was just like, oh, these are like two of my favorite things in the world, motorcycles and coffee. And my understanding is they weren't using it very much as an actual coffee bar, but more as a way to kind of like promote the coffee shops. I could be wrong about that, but I never saw it actually working. I just saw it on display. So I don't know if it had all the inner workings to actually to work. But I took inspiration from that, and we tweaked the design of how we wanted to do it on top of we kind of turned it sideways and made a countertop that folded out. And so we did quite a few things that were different than the one I saw in Portland. But that definitely was the inspiration that we got like 5 years